Welcome to the next in our series of online lectures for Western Civ 1. Today we are going to continue our conversation about the Crusades, talking about the Second, Third, and Fourth Crusades. As always, there are some key terms in the upper left-hand corner of the screen that you should be able to track by the time this lecture is over. So with that said, let's get to it. As we learned, the First Crusade was launched by Pope Urban II in 1095 when he called for an army of Christian knights to liberate the holy city of Jerusalem from Muslim control. Using the established ideas of penance and pilgrimage, Urban promised forgiveness of sins for any knight willing to make the difficult and dangerous journey. Urban's request had mixed results. On the one hand, he successfully motivated European Christians to take up the cross and the sword against non-Christians. In fact, he may have been too successful. An initial group of peasants and knights made the journey in 1096. Led by the charismatic prophet Peter the Hermit, the motley crew failed to liberate the Holy Land. However, along the way they did kill thousands of Jews that they encountered in cities in France and Germany. The actual First Crusade was more successful. Launched in 1096 and led by 5 powerful noblemen, the group was successful in capturing the cities of Antioch and Jerusalem. But instead of turning that territory over to the emperor of the Byzantine Empire, as they had agreed, the Crusaders kept the land for themselves. These territories became known as the Crusader states, and they included the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the County of Tripoli, the Principality of Antioch, and the County of Edessa. But conquering territory was one thing. Holding on to it was quite different. The Crusader states were regularly under attack by the surrounding Islamic forces, and in 1144 CE, the county of Edessa was reconquered by the Seljuk Turks. A second crusade was ordered in 1147 to recapture Edessa, but it failed. The conquest of Edessa was just the beginning, however. After the Second Crusade, a new Islamic leader emerged in the Middle East. His name was Saladin. Saladin is going to be one of the most important leaders of the medieval world. Before he dies, he will unify the Islamic world, reconquer Jerusalem from the Crusaders, and do so without much of the bloodshed that typically characterized medieval warfare. But who was Saladin? Saladin was a Kurd by ethnicity. Today, Kurds live mainly in Turkey and Iraq. In fact, if you follow events in the Middle East today, you will hear a great deal about the Kurds and Kurdish forces, who have become close allies of the United States. But that is all way in Saladin's future. Saladin was also a Sunni Muslim. As we have previously discussed, Islam was then and is still today divided into major factions. The two largest groups are the Sunnis and the Shiites. In the time of Saladin, Sunnis controlled modern-day Iraq. This is the reddish-orange region on the map above. Shiites controlled Egypt and much of North Africa, the region in green on the map above. As Saladin rose to become a prominent military leader, his first objective was to unify the Islamic world. This he did by conquering the Shiite Muslims that controlled Egypt. With the Islamic world united behind him, Saladin now turned his attention on the Crusader states. In 1187 CE, he defeated a Christian force and negotiated the Muslim reconquest of Jerusalem. Unlike the Crusaders, however, whose conquest of Jerusalem had been incredibly bloody, costing the lives of tens of thousands of Muslims, Jews, and Christians, Saladin took the city peacefully. As part of the negotiations, he allowed Christians to leave the city unharmed. He also promised to preserve Christian holy sites and allow Christian pilgrimages into the city. In fact, Saladin's generosity as a conqueror soon became known across Europe. Saladin's reconquest of Jerusalem motivated the Christians of Europe to mount a third crusade to take the holy city. The third crusade was led by King Richard of England. Known as Richard the Lion-Hearted, King Richard retook much of the territory conquered by Saladin. Incidentally, he is also the reason why Clark's mascot is a lion. He failed, however, to take Jerusalem. Instead, he negotiated a settlement with Saladin, which allowed Muslims to control the city. Saladin promised to protect Christian pilgrims that wanted to visit the city and its many holy sites. Still, the peace did not hold. Instead, 10 years later, a fourth crusade was mounted to once again liberate the Holy Land from Islamic rule. The irony and tragedy of the Fourth Crusade, however, is that the Crusaders never reached Jerusalem. Instead, during their stopover in Venice, they were met by a Byzantine prince named Alexius. Alexius promised the Crusaders great wealth if only they would first return him to the city of Constantinople before continuing on to the Holy Land. Prince Alexius asked one more thing. He wanted the Crusaders to support his claim to the Byzantine throne. Never one to turn down wealth, the Crusaders agreed. In 1203 CE, they reached Constantinople, and, as agreed, they defeated the armies of the current Byzantine Empire and placed Prince Alexius on the throne. Over the next year, however, Alexius reneged on his deal to pay what he had promised the Crusaders. The knights responded by rampaging through the city, killing tens of thousands, and destroying churches, homes, and government buildings. They also seized any gold or silver that they found. Pope Innocent III, who had called for the Fourth Crusade, was horrified by this violence, directed against fellow Christians. The legacy of the Fourth Crusade was significant. For one thing, it deepened the divide between the Church in Constantinople and that in Rome. In fact, it was not until the year 2004 that Pope John Paul II apologized to the leader of the Greek Orthodox Church for the destruction of Constantinople more than 800 years earlier. Another legacy of the attack was to greatly weaken the Byzantine Empire. While it would continue to stand for another 250 years, it would ultimately fall to the forces of Islam in 1453 CE. Excuse me. The Fourth Crusade marked the last true crusade to the Holy Land, launched and approved by the Roman Catholic Church. However, it did not end the crusading mentality that continued to dominate Europe for the next several hundred years. That mentality led to a number of events of which I'm sure you're quite familiar. For example, Spain was finally freed from Islamic control in 1492, when the last Islamic forces were driven back into Africa. That same year, Christopher Columbus reached the Americas and promised to Christianize the peoples that he found there. Closer to home, other crusades were relaunched. For example, there would be crusades against heretics, or those who challenged official church teachings. This will consume Europe throughout much of the 13th, 14th, and 15th centuries. Institutions like the Inquisition, a church court created to try heretics, will also be created. As for the Holy Land, it would never return to Christian control. The hatred between Christians and Muslims, however, has endured down to this day. That's the end of this online lecture. If you have any questions, please send me an email or stop by my office, or please ask me in class. Or just go back and rewatch this again. Anyway, thank you for listening, and I'll see you soon.